When the night feels longer than your strength, when the silence answers your prayers louder than any voice, when doors close that you were certain God opened, the human heart begins to ask a dangerous question. Why would a loving God allow this? That question can either become a doorway into deeper faith or a prison of doubt that steals your peace. What you do with what God allows will determine whether your pain becomes a platform for purpose or a place of defeat. Every season you walk through, every delay you endure, every loss you grieve, and every battle you fight is not random. Heaven does nothing by accident. What God allows has purpose even when you cannot see it, even when you cannot understand it, even when it feels unfair. Purpose is often hidden inside pressure. Diamonds are not born in comfort. They are formed under crushing weight. Gold is not purified in a cool room. It is refined in fire. Muscles are not strengthened in ease. They grow under resistance. In the same way, faith is not developed in convenience. It is built in adversity. The problem is not the pressure. The problem is when we misinterpret the pressure. We assume that hardship means abandonment, delay means denial, and struggle means God has forgotten us. But often hardship means preparation, delay means alignment, and struggle means God is shaping something inside you that comfort never could. Nothing in your life happens by accident. Every season you walk through, every door that opens or closes, every unexpected delay, every struggle that challenges your strength carries divine intention. It is easy to believe God is working when blessings flow freely, when prayers are answered quickly, and when life feels stable. But faith matures when you recognize that God is just as active in uncertainty as he is in victory. What feels like interruption is often redirection. What feels like delay is often divine alignment. Heaven does not operate randomly. God is constantly shaping outcomes, positioning hearts, and preparing futures far beyond what the human eye can see. When you look at your life only through natural understanding, certain seasons feel confusing and even unfair. You may ask why opportunities disappeared, why relationships shifted, why progress slowed, or why obstacles appeared when you were finally moving forward. But God sees the full picture while you only see one frame of the story. He understands how each moment connects to the next. A closed door may prevent a future disaster you cannot detect. A detour may lead you toward a better destination than the one you planned. A delay may protect you from entering a season before your character is ready to carry it. Divine intention is not always comfortable, but it is always purposeful. Every season carries a lesson designed to shape your identity, not just your success. Seasons of growth stretch your faith. Seasons of loss refine your priorities. Seasons of waiting teach patience and trust. Seasons of uncertainty build spiritual endurance. Even joyful seasons strengthen gratitude and stewardship. Nothing is wasted in God's economy. Every moment is shaping your perspective, sharpening your discernment, and strengthening your dependence on him. You are not simply passing through time. Time is shaping who you are becoming. When you embrace the truth that every season has divine intent, your mindset shifts. Instead of constantly resisting your current circumstances, you begin to ask what God is developing within you. You stop measuring your life only by speed and visible results and start valuing depth, wisdom, and spiritual maturity. You recognize that God is not in a hurry because he is building something that must last. Quick success without strong foundations often collapses under pressure, but slow, intentional growth produces stability that can sustain future blessings. There are moments when you may feel overlooked, delayed, or hidden, but hidden seasons often prepare you for public impact. Roots grow deep underground before the tree ever becomes visible above the soil. In those unseen moments, strength is developing where no applause exists. Character is being formed when nobody is watching. Discipline is being cultivated when no reward seems immediate. God often uses quiet seasons to prepare you for loud victories. Understanding. Divine intent also guards your heart from bitterness and comparison. When you see others advancing faster, receiving blessings sooner, or walking different paths, you learn not to measure your journey against theirs. God custom designs every path according to purpose, calling, and destiny. What works for someone else may not be safe for you. What delays you may be accelerating someone else. God is not competing with timelines. He is crafting lives. When adversity appears, divine intention teaches you not to panic or assume punishment. Difficulty does not mean God has abandoned you. Often it means God is strengthening you. Storms reveal what calm seasons hide. Pressure exposes where your trust truly rests. Challenges invite you to lean deeper into faith rather than self-reliance. If God allowed the season and the season carries purpose, your responsibility is not to understand everything, but to remain faithful within it. Divine intent also develops resilience. You learn that setbacks are not endings, but transitions. Failure is not final when surrender remains alive. Disappointment becomes a teacher instead of a destroyer. You become emotionally stronger, spiritually deeper, and mentally wiser as you walk through seasons instead of running from them. Each season trains your endurance for what lies ahead. When you fully trust that God is intentional with every chapter of your life, peace begins to replace anxiety. You stop obsessing over what you cannot control and start resting in who holds control. You trust that even unanswered prayers are being answered in ways you cannot yet recognize. You believe that God's timing is wiser than your impatience and his plans are higher than your assumptions. Divine intention invites you into cooperation rather than resistance. Instead of fighting the season, you learn to grow through it. Instead of complaining about what is missing, you become grateful for what is developing. Instead of fearing the unknown, you walk forward in obedience. Faith becomes active, not passive. Trust becomes lived, not spoken. Every season, whether joyful or painful, fast or slow, clear or confusing, is moving you closer to the person God designed you to become. Nothing is wasted. Nothing is forgotten. Nothing is accidental. Even when you cannot trace his hand, you can trust his heart. Divine intention is shaping you into someone stronger than your past, wiser than your mistakes, and more aligned with your purpose than you ever imagined. Pressure is not the enemy. It is the instrument through which God forges strength, maturity, and faith. Just as gold is refined by fire and diamonds are formed under immense weight, the challenges, struggles, and obstacles in our lives are not meant to destroy us, but to develop us. When life presses in from all sides, when problems seem insurmountable, and when circumstances feel overwhelming, it is easy to become discouraged or question God's goodness. Yet it is precisely in these moments, NTS of pressure, that spiritual growth is accelerated. Comfort cannot produce character, ease cannot create endurance, and convenience cannot deepen faith. True strength emerges when we are stretched beyond what feels safe or familiar. Pressure reveals who we really are and who we are becoming under God's design. Most people instinctively try to escape pressure. When work is hard, relationships are tense, or life feels heavy, the natural response is to avoid the stress, minimize the challenge, or seek immediate relief. But God allows pressure to remain because it serves a purpose that shortcuts and instant fixes cannot achieve. The weight you feel is shaping your resilience. The difficulty you face is refining your perspective. The resistance you encounter is strengthening your determination. Life's pressures are not punishments. They are instruments of transformation designed to stretch your faith and enlarge your capacity for what lies ahead. Pressure tests priorities and exposes hidden weaknesses. When everything is easy, it is tempting to overlook flaws, take blessings for granted, or depend on circumstances rather than God. But under pressure, our true motives and heart conditions are revealed. Fear, pride, impatience, and self-reliance surface in ways that comfort cannot provoke. God uses these moments not to condemn, but to reveal what needs correction. Just as raw gold must go through intense heat to become pure, our character must pass through trials to be refined. The challenges in your life uncover areas that require surrender, humility, and trust in God. Without pressure, these lessons often remain hidden and growth remains incomplete. Pressure also develops perseverance. Endurance is not learned in smooth seasons or easy circumstances. It is cultivated when we face obstacles that demand persistence. When doors close repeatedly, when setbacks occur, or when plans fail, the tendency is to quit or give up. But perseverance strengthens the spiritual muscles that allow us to continue walking by faith, even when the outcome is uncertain. Pressure teaches patience with timing, faith in God's promises, and courage to move forward despite fear. The longer we remain faithful under pressure, the more prepared we become for the opportunities God has placed ahead. Additionally, pressure builds dependency on God. In seasons of comfort, it is possible to rely on our own strength, intellect, or resources. We may feel confident because circumstances seem favorable, but pressure exposes our limitations and forces us to seek divine help. When the situation surpasses human ability, faith becomes the only viable option. Pressure drives us to pray deeper, trust harder, and rely on God more fully than we would otherwise. It reminds us that we are not self-sufficient and that true strength comes from Him. The more we lean on God in pressure, the more our faith becomes rooted in His power rather than our own abilities. Pressure also prepares us for Gria, to responsibility and higher blessings. God does not entrust significant assignments or larger opportunities to untested hearts. Just as a weightlifter gradually increases resistance to build muscle, God allows challenges to stretch us so that we can handle more. The trials you endure today may be developing the patience, wisdom, and endurance required for the calling of tomorrow. If growth were instant or easy, your capacity for handling success, influence, and responsibility would be limited. Pressure expands your ability to manage not only success, but also the challenges that accompany it. The refining nature of pressure also produces perspective. When life is uncomfortable, it forces you to see what truly matters. Superficial concerns lose significance under real pressure, and essential truths rise to the surface. Relationships, priorities, values, and faith are tested, revealing what will endure in the long term. Pressure strips away what is unnecessary and directs attention toward what is eternal. In the fire of difficulty, the heart's focus shifts from temporary comfort to lasting purpose. This perspective allows you to endure hardships with hope and clarity, understanding that present challenges are molding you for something far greater. Pressure is also a catalyst for creativity and problem solving. When routine and ease dominate life, innovation often stagnates. But pressure compels you to think differently, adapt quickly, and seek solutions beyond conventional methods. Challenges ignite resourcefulness and ingenuity that are often dormant in comfort. Under pressure, you discover strengths, talents, and abilities you did not know you possessed. These discoveries not only help you overcome current obstacles, but also equip you for future challenges. Finally, pressure strengthens testimony. Enduring trials and remaining faithful under strain produces a story of perseverance and victory that can inspire and uplift others. People are drawn to those who have faced adversity and emerged stronger because they see God's faithfulness lived out in real life. The testimony born from pressure carries weight, authority, and authenticity that cannot be fabricated. It serves as a beacon of hope, proof that challenges are not permanent barriers but stepping stones toward purpose and blessing. Understanding that pressure is purposeful transforms the way you respond to difficulty. Instead of resenting hardship, fearing resistance, or avoiding struggle, you learn to embrace the refining process. You begin to see every challenge as an opportunity for growth, every obstacle as a chance to deepen faith, and every weight as a tool for strengthening character. Pressure is not punishment, it is preparation. It is God's way of stretching you beyond comfort, shaping you beyond limitation, and building you into someone capable of handling the blessings and responsibilities He has planned for your life. When you internalize this truth, your faith becomes unshakable. Your perseverance becomes unwavering, and your life becomes a testament to the transformative power of God's refining hand. Delays are often one of the hardest things to endure. We pray, we plan, and we work, yet answers do not arrive according to our timetable. It is natural to feel frustrated, anxious, or even abandoned when things take longer than expected. But what feels like a delay may, in God's perspective, be a divine protection. Timing is everything, and God's timing is perfect. He sees beyond the immediate moment and understands the consequences of what we cannot see. A blessing received too early can overwhelm, destroy, or misalign a person. A door opened before preparation can bring ruin instead of reward. What we perceive as postponement is often a period of preparation that safeguards our destiny, cultivates character, and ensures that when the blessing comes, we are ready to receive it fully and responsibly. Delays test patience and faith. In a world that values speed and instant gratification, waiting is countercultural. We are accustomed to immediate results and quick solutions, but faith often grows in the space where answers are delayed. Waiting stretches us spiritually, teaching us to trust God rather than rushed circumstances. It cultivates endurance and resilience, reminding us that our perspective is limited, but God's plan is unlimited. During a delay, we learn to rest in God's faithfulness rather than lean on our own understanding. The time spent waiting is not wasted. It is an opportunity to mature, refine motives, and prepare emotionally, spiritually, and mentally for what lies ahead. Delays also refine motives. If we received everything instantly, we might pursue blessings for the wrong reasons, status, pride, or selfish gain, rather than for the purposes God intends. Waiting creates space for our hearts to align with God's will. It teaches humility, gratitude, and dependence on Him. It shifts our focus from entitlement to stewardship. During delays, God shapes our perspective so that we value the blessing not just for what it provides materially or externally, but for how it fulfills His purpose in our lives and the lives of others. By the time the blessing arrives, it is no longer just a reward. It is an opportunity to glorify God and impact others positively. Divine delays also protect us from harm. A door that seems ideal at one moment may bring complications, distraction, or danger if entered too soon. God's wisdom surpasses human understanding, and His foresight safeguards us from outcomes we cannot predict. Many times, what appears to be a missed opportunity is actually a redirection towards something better. Delays can prevent financial ruin, relational heartache, career mistakes, or spiritual compromise. Trusting in God's timing requires patience and humility, but it ultimately ensures that blessings arrive when the circumstances are aligned for our good and for His glory. Delays foster deeper trust in God's character. When prayers are not answered immediately, the temptation is to question God's goodness or doubt His care. Yet faith deepens when trust persists despite the silence or uncertainty. Waiting teaches reliance on God's promises rather than human effort or visible evidence. It develops a relationship rooted in confidence that His timing, motives, and understanding are perfect. Through delays, we learn to believe in what cannot yet be seen and to hold on to hope even when circumstances seem bleak. This kind of trust cannot be rushed or manufactured. It must be forged over time, often in the midst of waiting. During delays, God also strengthens our character and equips us for greater responsibility. Impatience, impulsiveness, and short-sightedness can lead to mistakes if blessings arrive before preparation. By allowing delays, God creates a space for growth, learning, and spiritual maturity. We acquire wisdom, discipline, and endurance that enable us to handle success responsibly. When the blessing finally arrives, we are not only prepared to enjoy it, but also to manage it in a way that honors God, sustains long-term fruitfulness, and blesses others. The delay is training for integrity, stewardship, and leadership. Another aspect of divine delay is the opportunity for alignment. Sometimes timing must coincide with other events, people, or circumstances for God's plan to be fully realized. A blessing given too soon or too late may miss its intended impact. God's delay coordinates unseen elements, orchestrates relationships, and positions resources so that His plan unfolds perfectly. While waiting may feel frustrating, it is part of a divine synchronization that ensures maximum effect. Faithful waiting allows us to participate in God's orchestration rather than attempting to force outcomes according to our limited understanding. Finally, delays create space for gratitude, reflection, and perspective. In seasons of waiting, we learn to appreciate the value of what is coming. We develop anticipation rather than entitlement. We gain insight into our own growth, the lessons learned, and the ways God has been present even when unseen. By the time the blessing manifests, our hearts are ready to receive it with a deeper awareness of its significance. We are not simply granted a reward. We are transformed in the process, making the blessing far richer than we could have imagined. Understanding delays as divine protection transforms the way we approach life. We stop seeing postponed answers as rejection and start seeing them as preparation. We stop comparing ourselves to others and start trusting God's individualized plan. We stop rushing and start resting. We stop questioning and start aligning our hearts with God's timing. Every delay carries a purpose to protect, to refine, to prepare, and to position us for something greater. When we embrace this truth, our waiting becomes active, faith-filled, and purposeful. We learn that God is never late and never wrong. His timing is perfect, and every moment of delay is a step closer to the fulfillment of his perfect plan for our lives. Loss is one of the most difficult realities we face in life. It comes unexpectedly, often without warning, and it leaves a mark on our hearts that cannot be ignored. The pain of losing a job, a relationship, a dream, or even a loved one can feel unbearable. In those moments, it is natural to ask, why did this happen? Why would God allow this? Yet loss is never meaningless in God's hands. While it may feel like an ending, it is often the beginning of a profound transformation. God allows loss to teach lessons, refine character, realign priorities, and deepen dependence on him. Every season of loss carries a purpose, even if it is hidden until we look back in hindsight. One of the first purposes of loss is perspective. When we experience loss, we are forced to see life differently. Things we once considered essential suddenly lose their power over us, while values and truths that matter eternally come into sharper focus. Loss strips away the illusions of control and forces us to recognize what is truly significant. Material possessions, social approval, or status may fade, but spiritual growth, faith, and character remain. The emptiness that loss creates is often the space where gratitude, reflection, and wisdom take root. What we mourn can reveal what we truly cherish, guiding us toward a life aligned with God's eternal priority. Loss also cultivates humility and dependence on God. When we lose something or someone, we're reminded that we do not control every outcome. Human strength, resources, and effort are limited, and we are forced to lean on God's wisdom and provision. In the absence of security, comfort, or certainty, our reliance shifts from self to the Creator. This dependence nurtures spiritual maturity, patience, and a deeper understanding of God's sovereignty. When we experience loss, we discover that our foundation must be rooted not in circumstances, but in the unchanging nature of God. The pain teaches us to trust him even when the path is unclear, and to recognize that he can redeem what seems irretrievable. Another significant purpose of loss is transformation. While comfort often preserves, loss purifies and reshapes. It challenges us to release attachment to what we cannot keep and to embrace growth through adversity. Emotional resilience, inner strength, and spiritual depth are cultivated in the fires of loss. Grief, though painful, exposes areas of the heart that require healing. It softens pride, humbles ambition, and fosters compassion. Those who have experienced deep loss are often able to empathize more fully, minister more authentically, and value relationships and blessings with greater intentionality. Loss becomes a refining agent, producing qualities in us that success, comfort, and convenience alone cannot develop. Loss also redirects and realigns our path. Sometimes we cling to situations, people, or dreams that are not meant to remain in our lives. What we perceive as a tragedy may actually be a redirection. God allows loss to remove obstacles, clear the way, and guide us toward new opportunities that better align with his purpose. Closed doors may be protection, relationships that end may be preservation, and dreams that dissolve may make room for greater blessings. The challenge is to trust that God's plan is wiser than our understanding, and that his redirection is often a hidden act of love designed to position us for long-term good rather than immediate gratification. Loss also strengthens faith. Facing something we cannot fix, control, or replace forces us to rely on God's promises rather than human solutions. In moments of loss, prayer becomes more sincere, trust grows deeper, and intimacy with God becomes more personal. We learn to navigate grief, disappointment, and uncertainty with courage and perseverance. Over time, the faith developed through loss becomes a foundation that supports us in future challenges. It equips us to endure with hope, maintain perspective, and continue moving forward even when circumstances seem bleak. The spiritual fortitude gained in seasons of loss cannot be learned in ease or comfort, Moreover, loss can prepare us to become a source of encouragement and inspiration to others. Those who have endured hardship carry a testimony that resonates with people experiencing similar struggles. The lessons earned, the faith exercise, and the resilience developed become a beacon of hope. What once felt like defeat or emptiness is transformed into a tool for ministering, comforting, and guiding others. Loss becomes a bridge that connects our experiences to the needs of others, multiplying the impact of what God has taught us. Finally, loss often opens space for new beginnings. Though it closes chapters, it prepares the soil for growth, new opportunities, and blessings that may have been impossible to receive otherwise. It teaches patience, refines expectations, and invites discernment. Loss reminds us that life is a series of seasons, each with a purpose, and that endings often precede new beginnings. By embracing the lessons of loss rather than resisting them, we position ourselves to receive what God has prepared in the fullness of his timing and wisdom. Understanding that loss carries purpose changes the way we approach grief and disappointment. Instead of viewing it as punishment or neglect, we begin to see it as a tool for growth, healing, and preparation. We learn to trust God's sovereignty, depend on his guidance, and embrace the transformation he works in our hearts. Through loss, we discover strength we did not know we possessed, compassion we would not have developed otherwise, and faith that endures beyond circumstances. What seems like an ending may, in fact, be the start of something greater. Loss, when surrendered to God, becomes not a mark of defeat, but a doorway to purpose, maturity, and eternal perspective. It is through these seasons that we learn to see with spiritual eyes, trust with deeper confidence, and walk with resilience that carries us into God's perfect plan. Opposition is an inevitable part of life, but it is far more than an obstacle. It is a confirmation, a teacher, and a refining force designed to strengthen faith and reveal purpose. When we pursue God's calling, seek to grow spiritually, or walk in alignment with his will, resistance will often arise. Opposition can come in many forms: criticism from others, unexpected setbacks, relational conflicts, spiritual attacks, or even inner doubts and fears. At first, it may feel discouraging or unfair, causing us to question our path, our decisions, or even God's presence. Yet opposition is not a signal of abandonment. Rather, it is a marker that we are on the right track. Darkness never attacks what is harmless, and resistance rarely appears where there is no threat to the enemy's agenda. The very fact that we face opposition can be proof that we are moving in alignment with God's purpose and stepping into territory that matters. Opposition reveals our true identity and the strength of our faith. When everything is easy and comfortable, it is tempting to believe that our confidence, perseverance, and trust are secure, but it is under pressure that character is revealed. Opposition exposes weaknesses, tests convictions, and challenges loyalties. It shows whether our faith is rooted in circumstances or anchored in God's truth. It demonstrates whether we rely on our own abilities or fully depend on the guidance and strength of the Lord. The trials that come through opposition are often the moments where our spiritual depth is measured and strengthened, ensuring that when victory arrives, it is not shallow or fleeting, but grounded in unshakable trust. Resistance also develops perseverance. When challenges arise, the temptation is to give up, avoid confrontation, or take an easier path. However, steadfastness in the face of opposition builds spiritual endurance and resilience. Each trial we navigate teaches us to rely on God's wisdom, remain faithful despite uncertainty, and continue moving forward even when success is not immediate. Opposition trains patience, teaches discernment, and molds the heart into a vessel capable of carrying responsibility and influence. Without opposition, we may never develop the spiritual stamina required to fulfill God's calling in its fullness. Opposition also sharpens spiritual discernment. When resistance arises, it forces us to examine motives, test strategies, and evaluate our alignment with God's will. Not all challenges are from external sources. Some are allowed by God to reveal blind spots, hidden weaknesses, or areas requiring growth. Facing obstacles teaches us to differentiate between temporary setbacks, divine guidance, and enemy interference. This discernment is essential for wise decision-making. avoiding unnecessary pitfalls, and maintaining faithfulness. Through opposition, God provides a classroom for spiritual maturity, teaching us how to navigate life with wisdom rather than relying solely on human understanding. Another purpose of opposition is to cultivate humility and dependence on God. When resistance appears, it often highlights the limitations of our own strength, knowledge, and resources. It reminds us that we cannot achieve God's purposes through self-reliance alone. True authority, influence, and spiritual power are developed when we surrender control and seek God's intervention. Opposition strips away pride, challenges self-sufficiency, and fosters reliance on divine wisdom. Through this process, we learn that victory is not found in human effort alone, but in obedience, prayer, and faithfulness to God's leading. Opposition also strengthens faith in ways comfort cannot. Faith is not validated when life is smooth. It is tested and solidified when challenges threaten to overwhelm us. When we continue to trust God despite resistance, we demonstrate that our hope is not anchored in circumstances, but in His promises and character. Each victory over opposition reinforces confidence in God's faithfulness, encouraging us to remain steadfast even when faced with greater trials in the future. Opposition becomes a proving ground where faith is exercised, refined, and made resilient. Additionally, opposition prepares us to impact others. The experience of Fakshi, NG challenges persevering, and ultimately overcoming equips us to encourage, guide, and inspire those walking through similar struggles. Our testimony becomes a tool for ministry, showing that resistance is not a sign of failure, but a stepping stone toward purpose. Those who have endured opposition develop empathy, discernment, and authority that can provide hope and insight for others. The lessons learned through opposition are not merely personal. They have the power to transform communities, influence generations, and glorify God through shared experiences of triumph over trials. Finally, opposition confirms divine alignment and spiritual assignment. When resistance arises, it often indicates that we are on a path that matters, moving towards something significant in God's plan. The presence of opposition signals that the enemy perceives the potential impact of our actions and seeks to hinder progress. Rather than seeing resistance as discouragement, it can be embraced as confirmation that our direction is meaningful, that our calling is valid, and that God is working behind the scenes to bring victory. Opposition is not a barrier to purpose. It is proof that purpose is in motion. Understanding the role of opposition transforms the way we respond to challenges. We no longer fear resistance, avoid confrontation, or feel defeated by setbacks. Instead, we recognize opposition as a tool that strengthens faith, sharpens discernment, cultivates perseverance, and confirms alignment with God's plan. Resistance becomes an opportunity for growth rather than an obstacle to avoid. It shapes character, deepens dependence on God, and prepares us to walk confidently in the calling and purpose He has assigned. When we embrace opposition with faith and perseverance, we discover that challenges are not setbacks, but stepping stones, not threats, but confirmations, and not hindrances, but instruments through which God shapes, strengthens, and positions us for His glory. Silence is one of the most misunderstood seasons of life. When God does not answer immediately, when prayers seem to echo back to an empty room, when doors appear closed and the path seems unclear, it is natural to feel confusion, doubt, or even fear. Yet God's silence is not abandonment. It is intentional, purposeful, and often necessary for spiritual growth. Many people assume that a delay in response means neglect or indifference. But in reality, silence is a powerful tool that God uses to refine faith, cultivate patience, deepen trust, and prepare individuals for greater levels of intimacy and understanding with Him. Silence teaches lessons that cannot be learned in moments of ease, comfort, or immediate gratification. And it often precedes breakthroughs that would be impossible without the period of waiting and reflection. Silence forces us to confront where our faith truly rests. When everything is going well, it is easy to trust in blessings, circumstances, or visible signs of God's favor. But in silence, we are stripped of the external assurances we often rely on. The absence of immediate answers compels us to anchor our trust in God's character rather than the outcomes we can see. Faith becomes not about what God will do for us next, but about who God is. This shift from outcome-based faith to identity-based faith strengthens spiritual maturity and resilience. It teaches us to walk by trust rather than by sight, to lean on his promises even when the fulfillment is not immediately visible, and to believe in his goodness when circumstances suggest otherwise. Silence also cultivates patience and endurance. Waiting is never easy, but it develops qualities that instant answers cannot. During seasons of silence, we learn to pace our hearts, control our impulses, and remain steadfast in our commitments. We are reminded that not all things happen according to our timetable and that God's timing is perfect. Patience is not merely passive waiting. It is an active exercise of faith, a choice to remain obedient, and a decision to trust that what is delayed is not denied. Through silence, endurance is built, character is shaped, and readiness for future responsibilities is established. When the response finally comes, we are equipped to receive it with wisdom, gratitude, and stability. Silence often serves as a period of preparation. God uses these quiet seasons to equip us spiritually, emotionally, and mentally for what lies ahead, just as an athlete trains extends. Lively before a competition or a student studies before an exam, our time in silence is a period of preparation for the breakthroughs, responsibilities, and opportunities that God has planned. During silence, he cultivates discernment, deepens understanding, and aligns our hearts with his will. The challenges we face, the reflection we engage in, and the prayers we sustain are all part of the preparation process. Without this intentional season, we may be unprepared for the magnitude of the blessings or the responsibility that awaits us. Silence also teaches dependence. In the absence of immediate solutions, support, or visible guidance, we are reminded that God is our ultimate source of strength, provision, and wisdom. We are forced to rely on him rather than human understanding or our own efforts. This dependence fosters humility, increases spiritual intimacy, and develops a deeper relationship with God. We learn that he is sufficient, that his timing is perfect, and that his wisdom surpasses our understanding. Silence removes distractions, strips away false confidence, and reveals that the security we seek must ultimately come from him, not from circumstances or external sources. Another significant aspect of silence is that it strengthens character and resilience. Waiting and uncertainty often bring discomfort, doubt, or fear, but enduring these challenges shapes our inner life in profound ways. Our emotions are refined, our patience is tested, and our perseverance is strengthened. Over time, the lessons learned in silence, trust, faith, endurance, humility, and discernment form a foundation for future success and stability. When God responds after a period of silence, the breakthrough is not only a solution to a problem, but also a testament to the growth and maturity gained during the waiting period. This process ensures that blessings are not only received, but handled with wisdom and spiritual integrity. Silence can also deepen spiritual intimacy. In moments of quiet, when external noise is reduced, the heart becomes more attuned to God's presence, voice, and guidance. Prayer, meditation, and reflection take on greater significance because we are compelled to listen more intently, to seek more earnestly, and to engage more sincerely. Silence creates space for spiritual clarity, revelation, and alignment with God's purposes. It is in these quiet seasons that our relationship with God is strengthened, our understanding of his ways is deepened, and our faith is solidified. Finally, silence prepares us to become witnesses and sources of encouragement for others. Those who have learned to trust, persevere, and grow through seasons of unanswered questions can minister effectively to those facing similar challenges. The lessons gained in silence equip us to provide hope, insight, and encouragement to others navigating uncertainty. Our testimony becomes authentic because it is forged through experience, demonstrating that God's timing, wisdom, ND faithfulness are trustworthy, even when unseen. Understanding the purpose of silence transforms our perspective on waiting, unanswered prayers, and uncertainty. Instead of seeing silence as rejection, neglect, or indifference, we begin to recognize it as a deliberate tool for growth, preparation, and spiritual deepening. We learn to trust God's character, develop endurance, cultivate patience, embrace dependence, refine our faith, and draw closer to him. Silence is not empty. It is full of lessons, development, and divine intention. When we embrace it with faith and obedience, We discover that the quiet moments were never wasted, that the waiting was never meaningless, and that every period of silence was shaping us for the fulfillment of God's perfect plan. Facing fear is one of the most challenging aspects of the human experience. Fear can paralyze, hinder growth, and steal the joy and purpose that God intends for our lives. Yet God allows us to encounter fear, not to harm us, but to teach us how to overcome it, to reveal the depth of our faith, and to build courage that cannot be gained in comfort. Fear is often a signal that we're stepping into a space that matters, something beyond our comfort zone, something that has the potential to shape destiny, and something that, if conquered, will elevate our spiritual strength. It is in these moments of fear that God's power is displayed, that trust becomes active, and that faith is tested and strengthened. Facing fear is not optional in the journey of purpose. It is a necessary step toward the life God has designed for us. Fear exposes what we rely on. When circumstances are easy, confidence often comes from our own abilities, resources, or understanding. But fear strips away illusions of self-sufficiency and shows us the limitations of human strength. It reminds us that true security, guidance, and protection come not from circumstances or ourselves, but from God alone. When fear arises, it calls us to surrender, to rely fully on God, and to recognize that He is greater than the challenges we face. The encounter with fear reveals the depth of our dependence on Him, transforming our perspective and drawing us closer to His presence. In every fearful situation, there is an invitation to trust beyond what we can see and understand. Fear also teaches courage. Courage is not the absence of fear, but the decision to act despite it. Every time we confront fear, whether it is fear of failure, rejection, the unknown, or even personal inadequacy, we exercise faith and strengthen our spiritual resilience. The moments when fear feels overwhelming are often the same moments when God is preparing us for breakthrough, growth, and testimony. By stepping forward in faith, despite fear, we train ourselves to act in alignment with God's will rather than being paralyzed by doubt or anxiety. Courage is developed in action, not in avoidance, and every step taken despite fear builds spiritual strength and character. Fear is also a tool for refining faith. When faced with frightening circumstances, we are forced to trust in God's promises rather than in human logic. Fear challenges our belief in His protection, provision, and guidance, compelling us to exercise deeper faith. The presence of fear reveals whether our trust is superficial or rooted in God's unchanging character. Faith grows when we rely on God even when outcomes are uncertain, when we obey His direction despite discomfort, and when we move forward knowing that His power is sufficient. Fear tests the authenticity of our trust, and overcoming it strengthens the foundation upon which our spiritual life is built. Encountering fear also provides clarity and perspective. Fear often arises when we face situations beyond our control or when the stakes feel high. In these moments, fear highlights what is truly important and forces us to focus on God's presence and guidance. It sharpens discernment, strengthens priorities, and reveals areas that require growth or surrender. When fear confronts us, it serves as a mirror, reflecting both our limitations and the boundless nature of God's power. Recognizing this contrast allows us to navigate challenges with greater wisdom, confidence, and reliance on divine strength rather than human understanding. God also allows fear to prepare us for leadership and influence. Those who have faced and overcome fear are better equipped to guide, mentor, and inspire others. Experiencing fear and learning to overcome it builds empathy, credibility, and resilience. It equips us to minister effectively to those who are struggling with similar challenges. The lessons learned through fear are not only personal, but also communal. They position us to impact others and demonstrate the power of God's strength and human weakness. Fear, when conquered, becomes a tool for testimony, teaching others that God is greater than any obstacle, challenge, or threat we encounter. Facing fear develops perseverance. Fear can tempt us to quit, retreat, or avoid responsibility. Yet those who persist despite fear build endurance and inner fortitude. Each encounter with fear that is met with faith, obedience, and courage strengthens the spiritual muscles needed to sustain long-term growth and success. Perseverance cultivated through fear enables us to navigate future challenges with greater confidence, resilience, and reliance on God's guidance. Overcoming fear is not a one-time event, but a continual process that fortifies character and prepares the heart for greater responsibility. Finally, fear reveals opportunities for God's power to be displayed. When we feel inadequate, threatened, or vulnerable, God's strength becomes most evident. Human limitations bring divine possibilities into focus. Our weakness becomes the stage on which His power is manifested. By allowing fear, God creates a space for His presence, protection, and provision to be recognized. The greater the fear, the more visible His faithfulness becomes when we choose to trust Him. Fear, rather than being an obstacle, becomes the context in which God's greatness is highlighted and celebrated. Understanding that fear is purposeful transforms our response to it. We stop avoiding it, resisting it, or being paralyzed by it. Instead, we embrace fear as a signpost of growth, a testing ground for faith, and an opportunity for courage. Fear is not a barrier, but a doorway, an invitation to trust, act, and experience God's power in ways that comfort and ease never could provide. Every moment of fear carries the potential to refine character, strengthen faith, and position us for breakthrough. When we confront fear with faith, obedience, and courage, we discover that what once threatened to hold us back becomes the very instrument that propels us forward into purpose, testimony, and victory. Every trial we face carries a lesson, and every struggle we endure has the potential to become a testimony. Life is full of challenges, disappointments, and hardships, but God does not waste any of them. What may feel like a meaningless difficulty today is often the seed of a story that will inspire, encourage, and transform others tomorrow. Trials are not only about shaping us personally, they are about preparing us to impact the world around us. The experiences we walk through, the pain we endure, and the victories we achieve through perseverance become a living witness to God's faithfulness, power, and purpose. Every hardship carries the potential to be more than a perso. Now battle. It can become a platform to bless, guide, and encourage others. Trials reveal our true character and the depth of our faith. When life is easy, it is simple to maintain faith, trust, and obedience. But it is in moments of struggle, when circumstances are difficult and outcomes uncertain, that faith is tested and revealed. How we respond to challenges shows the world and ourselves the authenticity of our trust in God. Do we complain, give up, or compromise when the road becomes difficult? Or do we remain steadfast, patient, and obedient despite the obstacles? These moments shape resilience, endurance, and spiritual depth. What we learn in the trial itself equips us to carry greater responsibility, wisdom, and influence once the season of difficulty passes. Trials also refine our perspective. Pain, loss, and difficulty force us to reconsider priorities, values, and perspectives that may have been overlooked during easier seasons. They teach us what truly matters and what can be released. The clarity gained through hardship allows us to see life more accurately, to appreciate blessings more fully, and to value relationships and experiences in a way that comfort alone cannot produce. Through trials, our vision becomes less about immediate gratification and more about long-term purpose. The lessons embedded in struggle shape the decisions, mindset, and priorities that define our future path. Another powerful aspect of trials is that they cultivate empathy and compass. Sion. When we endure challenges ourselves, we develop the ability to understand, relate to, and support others facing similar situations. Our pain equips us to become a source of hope, encouragement, and guidance for those who are still in the midst of their struggles. Personal suffering transforms into a ministry of presence, wisdom, and authenticity. By experiencing and overcoming hardships, we gain the credibility and insight needed to inspire others to trust, persevere, and rely on God's guidance in their own trials. Trials also strengthen our dependence on God. When we face challenges that exceed our natural strength, understanding, or resources, we are reminded that we cannot overcome alone. Difficult seasons force us to lean into God's wisdom, power, and provision, creating a deeper and more intimate relationship with Him. Dependence on God develops humility, spiritual maturity, and discernment. As we rely on Him to navigate obstacles, our faith grows stronger and our spiritual foundation becomes unshakable. Trials are opportunities to practice surrender and trust, teaching us that God's power is made perfect in weakness and that his timing and plan are always precise, even when we cannot see them. Perseverance is another critical outcome of enduring trials. Challenges tempt us to quit, retreat, or take shortcuts, but perseverance allows us to rise above adversity and continue moving forward. Each trial endured, each obstacle overcome, builds stamina, courage, and determination. These qualities are essential for sustaining long-term growth, handling future challenges, and embracing greater opportunities that require endurance. Trials teach us that success and breakthroughs are not measured solely by results, but by the faith, resilience, and consistency displayed during the process. Trials often produce unexpected blessings and opportunities. Difficulties can open doors, reveal hidden talents, strengthen character, and redirect us toward paths we would not have considered otherwise. What initially seems like a setback may be God's way of positioning us for a greater advantage. These experiences shape our understanding that even struggles have a purpose and are part of God's perfect plan. By embracing trials instead of resisting them, we become participants in the divine orchestration of our lives, allowing God to transform adversity into advantage. Finally, every trial prepares us for testimony. The stories of perseverance, faithfulness, and victory born from difficulty become powerful tools to inspire and guide others. What we endure today can be the encouragement someone else needs tomorrow. The pain, lessons, and breakthroughs that shape our character and faith are transformed into a message of hope and assurance. Our testimony illustrates that God's presence is constant, his wisdom unfailing, and his plans purposeful. The trials themselves, though painful in the moment, ultimately create opportunities for influence, inspiration, and the demonstration of God's glory. Understanding that every trial carries a future testimony transforms how we approach challenges. Instead of viewing hardship as punishment, failure, or meaningless suffering, we begin to see it as a purposeful part of a larger plan. Each difficulty becomes an opportunity to grow, to strengthen faith, to develop endurance, to refine perspective, and to prepare a story that will bless others. Trials are not merely obstacles to overcome. They are instruments of God's purpose, designed to shape character, build resilience, and create testimonies of hope, faith, and victory. When we embrace trials with trust, perseverance, and obedience, we discover that what once seemed like suffering becomes a platform for blessing, a source of encouragement, and a testimony of God's unchanging faithfulness.